to Season 2 of Pasco Podcast, a series where we discuss leadership in public service. We'd like to thank our sponsors, the 550,000 plus residents of Pasco County, as represented by the Board of County Commissioners. It's through their trust and empowerment of our workforce and leadership team that we're able to bring you this podcast. We created this podcast to help public servants build leadership skills and leverage them for success by sharing the experiences of our peers.
Hi, I'm Dan Biles, and welcome to our 11th episode of Pasco Podcast. Now, today you'll notice things look a little different. We hope you enjoy our newly redesigned set. We really appreciate the work that Aaron's done to put this all together. And now joining us today is Plan Development Director, Nectarios Pittos. Terry.
Morning, Dan.
Morning. And Principal Planner, Alexandra Laporte.
Good morning.
Morning. And welcome to the show. Now, I'm kind of going to just start, ask if you give just a short background of little experience and then how you got to Pasco.
Sure. So I've been an urban planner now for about 17, 18 years. So I've been doing that for a while. I started my career up in the Chicago region. Actually started working for the city of Chicago right out of college and did that for a couple of years. And then I transitioned to southwest suburbs of Chicago, so Village of Woodland Park. For those who are from that area, they'll know that. And there I did a lot of development review work, and I did that for about 10 or 11 years or so as part of my growth curve. And I thought, I need a change in the way I'm doing things. I'd like to have some kind of different experience in the planning world, and I wanted to do a little bit more long-range planning of sorts. And I saw some opportunities open up across the country, but ultimately Florida was a nice place to come and live. And Pasco happened to be one of the organizations that had a position open, and I applied for it among others in this region, in the Tampa Bay region. And I joined Pasco because it was the job that I was looking for. It was a long-range planning manager at the time. There was they were at the beginning of a culture change, and they were explaining that to me in the interview process, and that really resonated with me. It was similar to what I had experienced in my previous jobs and career, and I was really attracted to that, and I came on board. And then shortly after that, my journey with Pasco was a fairly quick one. I was planning manager in the long range division for a couple of months, and then I was tapped to become assistant director and then director.
Right.
Yeah. So
right. Well, thanks. And I bet the winters here are a little nicer than the winters in the Chicagoland area.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. For sure. And Alexandra?
Let's see. I guess I'm about the same trajectory as Terry in terms of time in the profession, but I took a little break to establish a family. And so Pasco was, I interviewed with Terry, and Pasco was my first re-entry into the professional world. I am an architect by training, so I went to school for architecture and decided to focus on urban design. And that's primarily where my professional experience had been until Pasco County. Worked with the Housing Authority of the City of Pittsburgh because my work as an urban designer, we worked a lot with housing authorities and Hope 6 projects, and I thought that would be a really great transition to be part of the project from start to finish and not just to come in as a consultant and leave. So, and then that was my entry into government, and worked as a consultant for nonprofits in the Pittsburgh area. So a little bit of everything, but I love being here.
Planner by trade, an architect by trade, and an engineer by trade.
And
we're going to talk about leadership today. How about that? We're not going to design anything.
And solving problems.
So, kind of as we get into it, Terry, y'all both kind of came on after you've been here not as long as I have. So you're kind of more new to the county, new to the organization. So kind of tell us a little bit about your leadership philosophy and how you work with others and how do you lead people in your group?
Sure. Yeah, I think I came a little bit after you. My leadership philosophy, I think, is influenced a lot by a couple of my own personal core values that I think nest well with the organization's core values. primarily, when I'm out and about and leading the team, my approach to team members is being kind to them, understanding what their situation is, explaining to them, taking the time to explain. So patience is another type of value that influences how I go about my leadership. Being kind, taking care of them in whatever way that I can, dedicating myself to making sure that they've got the resources necessary to complete their mission, basically. Another core value that I think influences me quite a bit is my desire to forgive people. People make a lot of mistakes. Everyone's imperfect. No job is easy, especially in the planning and development department. And I think, people tend to be afraid to make mistakes, but it's through mistakes that you can learn. And while forgiveness sounds a little weak, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not holding people accountable to their actions or encouraging responsibility. It's simply, I think it gives people the opportunity to do things, to learn, and then to grow. And then the accountability part is to make sure that you don't do it again. Right. So I think forgiveness is key there, because people can then experiment freely, and you're offering people an environment where they can innovate without fear.
Right. Yeah. All right. Cool. Thank you.
Leadership style or
philosophy.
I think primarily my philosophy comes from design and being in the architecture program, because you can, like Terry was saying, you have to try various concepts and see which one sticks and tweak those and keep tweaking. So I kind of just take that on as a daily reminder of, when you're challenged with an issue or a problem to tackle, that you need to have solutions that you aren't afraid of, putting out there and tweaking. So I don't know. I enjoy that as a design philosophy of leadership, essentially.
Right. Well, and that gets that while you talk about design philosophy and putting some ideas out there and then taking feedback from that, when from a leadership perspective, Brene Brown talks a lot about that with vulnerability, right?
Mm-hmm.
You excuse me. Now I'm going to need a drink of water. You kind of you put your feelings out there, you trust your people, and you become vulnerable, which is the same thing from a design perspective. You put a design out there on paper, and then you start taking feedback and criticism on the design and make changes, right? So
and build collaboration.
Which is creative. So I'm gonna bounce around, right? So when and how did you realize you kind of wanted to lead others? Because you're leading a team right now in long range planning, right? So when did you kind of just decide that?
I don't know if I decided, but I've always been one that thought of being an advocate first and foremost, and wanting to make a difference. So whether it was for my own interest or someone else who maybe didn't have a strong enough voice to be their advocate. So I think that was really what drew me to, I guess, more of a leadership role, is being someone's advocate and trying to improve.
Okay. All right. Terry?
There's a little bit of the same for me. I think what drew me to become a leader, it was, I would say it was an earlier time in my life that I wanted to become a leader, mainly because I wanted to help people. I realized that if I was going to take a back seat and just do the bare minimum and follow others, that you wouldn't be able to influence how the outcomes might be. But secondly, and in a design profession, it's like, why did you become a designer if you're not going to try to influence things? So, if I didn't want to sit in the back seat, I would have to take a more front seat approach. And I think one of the things that really resonated with me was seeing people struggle through the design challenges, and the ability to make an offering of an idea to somebody and to suggest to them that, well, maybe if we do this a little differently, or maybe if we do this, maybe your idea isn't the idea that you offer isn't, the one that everyone's going to use, but it can certainly spark a discussion that may lead to another type of solution or another idea that ultimately gets you to a solution. But to have that conversation, That's a leadership activity as I see it, even though I'm not telling people go left, go right, do whatever. You're offering ideas, and when you offer ideas, you're taking a risk at that point. And, we were talking about, taking the risk. The leader is usually the first one out. They're taking the most risk. So to have the courage to make that offering of an idea at the table of design is a leadership quality. And that was, for me, my introduction into leadership. And then once I started seeing that, okay, I can learn from others can learn from me, there's a mutual benefit here, it starts to sort of compound and snowball.
Right. And it's interesting, we're talking about design and ideas and leadership and how, but whether you're working on a project, a physical project, whether it's design of a building or a design of a community, or you're trying to solve a human services solution, it's still the same approach, right? You bring in ideas and, so it's, the leadership philosophies are transferable to the problems. They don't have to stick with what we're talking technical.
Right.
They don't necessarily have to stick with that, right?
Correct.
Right. So, So in terms of leadership, who's kind of been the biggest influence in your life from a leadership perspective and taught you the most?
That's a good question, and I've pondered that a few times, and it's kind of hard to pinpoint. I think a lot of people will talk about family being the people that you're around the most, and the people who are going to influence you. So certainly my father and my grandfathers played a big role. I think my wife plays a big role in that. I can't quite put my finger on a particular individual, but I think one thing that has stuck out to me over time as I've worked in this profession, and then also have embarked on my leadership journey here, is a very simple, I call it a commandment of sorts for me, and I'm sure a lot of people probably have heard it from time to time. It's love thy neighbor as thyself. So you look at your quote unquote your subordinates or your colleagues or your superiors, and you see them as other individuals who are working through their life just like you are, and you have to approach your work understanding that everybody lives one and the same life. You're not, someone different at home and someone different at work and someone different anywhere else or whatever. You all live one life. And so when you start to identify and understand that here's an individual in front of you, so take care of that person, help them, understand what they're going through. How can you help? Whether that's, answering the email because they asked you to respond to a very simple question, or that's, checking up on somebody because they're sick at home and saying, hey, how are you? How are you feeling? Right. That sort of thing. That's, I think, what's influenced me and what's driven me to, down this road or this path of being a leader.
Right. Okay.
I'm going to stick with my design.
That's okay.
I think my biggest influence professionally, anyway, both my professors at the university, but also my first job out of college, where really that the art of listening and empowering community members that are not usually empowered or heard. So in this case, still with public housing residents, where we went into their community and it was about drawing out, like we were just tools for them and facilitators for them to articulate, what kind of neighborhood they wanted to see for themselves and their family and future generations. So that was a big influence on me on how I would approach design and what it means to be a, urban planner, urban designer. It's not about the self, but it's really about empowering these communities to have access to, anything that they need and should have. So
yeah, and that's influence. A community that's usually not asked their opinion, right? Right. So that you probably had some struggles drawing that out to a certain extent, because they're usually not asked that opinion.
They're not, and they're skeptical. So they're like, why are you asking? It's not really, you're not really wanting to know. It's just a, kind of a charade of sorts. Right. But once you spend some time with them and they really, it's amazing. It's great. They have amazing ideas. And if you just ask them. Right.
And the same thing can be applied to employee groups, right? Or parts of our team, the leader comes in and starts asking opinion. Well, some of the natural reactions, you really don't want to know. You're just asking.
Right.
But you get involved and you spend time with them. Then you start to get those ideas and those things open up to you. So no, that's really good.
And if I can add, I think one of the aspects, especially in employee groups and whatnot, being able to deliver, hearing and listening and then delivering. It might take a little bit of time, but once you start delivering on the things that you've talked about, I think people then become even more willing to contribute their ideas and their thoughts, whether it's in the community setting or it's in the office.
Right. Well, and to go back to your point on, the reference right out of the gospel, right? Love your neighbor as yourself. And yes, I knew where that came from. Yeah. We all bring our whole person to work, and we all are the same people. We all have issues at home or in other areas of our life, and they impact the way we perform. And so we have to take that in mind as leaders and understand that. And as you said, reach out to them and make sure things are going okay, because sometimes work performance can be driven not by what's happening in work, but driven by outside influences. And we got to be mindful of that. You don't want to lose a great employee over a fact that they're going through a tough period, right? Right.
Yeah.
So no, that's really, really, really good stuff. So how about, as you've kind of looked back on your career, any lessons about leadership you'd like to share, successes, challenges,
Lessons on leadership, successes and challenges. I think the biggest challenge to a leader when they first enter the role. So let me take a step back, especially in the planning and development department and in any planning profession, really. If you're going to be a planner, you're going to be a leader. Leadership is not choosing you. You're choosing to become a leader when you become a planner, in my opinion, because you have to lead in community settings. You have to lead your customer. You have to lead your teams to understand what the design is, explain it, et cetera, and bring people together in a collaborative way, hopefully to a consensus, but if not, to a compromise, and carry your project forward. But I think, one of the biggest challenges once you embark on that, you decide I'm going to become a leader. The biggest challenge is not to think that you know it all. I'm the leader, or I'm the professional planner. I'm here from the government. I'm here to help you, kind of a thing. You walk into the room and you don't want to suggest that you know everything, because the truth of the matter is that you don't. Even me sitting here today as the planning and development director, secret, but I don't know everything. Right. It's impossible for me to know 500 different projects that are happening right now in the department. 300 of them are in current planning, another slew of independent projects, and another slew of so many 50 or something projects in long range planning, all of which have different timelines, different characteristics, different challenges. It's not possible to know everything. So if you walk into the room and you suggest to people that I know all the answers here, this is how we're going to do it, you're going to be faced with a severe challenge as a leader, because people are going to turn off. Right. So that's a big challenge there. And I can't say that I walked into that challenge lately, but I have walked into that challenge in the past when I was just a young planner one, trying to think of ways to contribute in a meeting and just being shut down constantly. Right. And this is an encouragement for all those young planners that are out there professionally. At least keep trying. But understand that, it takes a little bit of time to develop that influence. And then that influence, once you're able to deliver on that and what your ideas are, you demonstrate more and more courage to go about doing that. And I think that's the biggest success, is when you are offering ideas and people are recognizing that this is maybe not the best idea, but something that we can work with and develop, whether that's about a project or about a process or whatever you're leading. People then start listening to you. You develop that influence. And you know that you're successful when you have the courage at that point to be offering ideas over and over and over again, even if the idea is not a successful idea. It's not about continuous success in your ideas. It's about developing or generating energy and raising a level of necessity for people to understand what you're going to do or what we should be doing. And then there's a conversation, a little bit of a deliberation. You let people go out and do what they need to do to accomplish whatever the mission might be. And that's courageous, in my opinion. People are doing what they need to do. You're allowing them to do what they should be doing. And once you've developed that kind of courage, that comfort, comfort's not really a good word, I think. I don't think as a leader you're ever comfortable. At least I'm not. But at least you have the courage to go out and to face the challenges with your team all the time. So I think that's an element of success there.
Right. Excellent. Right.
Tools, I'd say history and what's applied to Pasco most currently is best practice. So we don't have to invent anything new. Usually others have had lots of ideas that you can draw from and learn from. And something that, was taught in school very much was that first you learn the history, the context before you engage, and then before you break rules. So, because if you don't know the rules, how are you going to break them? So you don't have to be cutting edge to really make an impact. But you have to be curious and continue to learn and learn from your surrounding, read up on best practice, and be able to try to see how you can implement, those features. I think that's, a tool that I always use all the time. And then I think a barrier to leadership, and maybe it's just getting people excited and maybe energized to put themselves out there. So you might, as a leader, put yourself out there, but then also having others to say, hey, creating that safe space sometimes can be, I think, challenging. And having that honest conversation,
Right.
Or even, if that safe space is not available to you, which sometimes we see it, but to persevere through even the not so safe space.
Right. Well, and you talked about being ready, willing, and able to bring ideas to the table, and that requires an element of psychological safety. Google's tested that, and that's the most powerful thing for great teams, right? Is the ability to have honest disagreement, discussion around ideas, and yet still move forward as a team, right? Psychological safety, the ability to do that. And again, we're talking in a technical context, but that applies to the parks maintenance crew as well, much as it applies to us and on long range planning. So, so how do you continue to build those leadership skills and develop your own leadership skills?
Reading, a lot of reading. There's a lot of reading to be done in the profession. There's a lot of reading to be done in the work that you're doing. There's a lot of reading to be done in understanding different leadership styles. So I would say, like, you have to put yourself in the same way that you put yourself out there to tell people this is, I think, the way we need to be or the way we need to go. You need to also put yourself out there to understand that I don't know everything, like we were talking about earlier, and I need to go and understand different strategies, different approaches, because life brings all sorts of things to you. So continuing education is very important. I think the other thing that's important to contemplate what you read, not just simply read it, but then to take a step back and really ponder, what are the implications to me? How would I go about doing this? Can I use the word meditate a little bit on it, or even pray about it in some respects? I think that's an important development quality that a leader advances themselves with.
Yeah, it's just to a certain extent, it's like we marinate steak or chicken, right? That Adam Grant talks about the positive aspects of procrastination, right?
Right.
It's not that you just wait till the end to do something. It's that you get it in your mind of what you need to do and what you need to accomplish, and then kind of just let your subconscious work on it over time.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, it's exactly what needs to happen.
Right. Yeah. In fact, we were talking about it yesterday as, one of the text on the screen was Martin Luther King, I Have a Dream speech. Mm-hmm. And, that phrase actually wasn't in his original text. That came at the very end, that he decided to add it because he'd been thinking about it. And then that came. So that catchphrase that we all know wasn't actually in the original text that he was going to deliver that day. So what do you think?
Actually, just totally, a 360 from design. I think being a parent and having, I have 2 kids, and they're very different. Right. And so my approach has had to be very different with each one, and present myself in a way where they're at. So for me, that's been a really eye-opening experience, because they're different from myself as well. Right. So I can't be projecting how I would tackle the situation. Right. Say, all right, you learn different than I do. So I need to figure out how I can mold myself to support you in that, challenge or what have you. So I think that's really made me a better person. Right. And as a result, really a better, I guess, team leader or something, because I had to do that with my kids.
Right. Yes, we all. I think I can concur with that. Yeah, 4, and they are all different. Yeah, all have different issues, and they're all in their 20s now. And but yeah, so as you are looking around your teams, and as we go through this journey of a career, how do you identify and raise other leaders? And again, I'll preface it. I think every member of our organization is in their own way a leader and should be a leader in their own way. But how do you identify and build and continue to groom the future leaders of the organization?
I'd say in terms of identifying, I always think about what is your strength, right? And again, I think that comes from, my older son. He has so many strengths, and he sometimes can get caught up on the weakness part. And so building him up to say, yes, we all have weaknesses. I have weaknesses too. I asked my boss to read my stuff. I don't like writing or whatever. So I think building someone up to focus on their strengths. And if this isn't a right fit for you, what is a right fit for you so you can be successful, I think is the most important. And then you can work on your weakness, when you have that opportunity of being in an environment that you feel comfortable and good in, then you can work on your weakness.
Right.
So.
Well, and that's the data shows that, right? That you make significantly more progress when you focus on your strengths than you do when you focus on your weaknesses.
Mm-hmm. I would echo Alexandra's comments. I think developing leaders, you have to put them in the right mindset. I think to the point of finding their strengths, helping them to understand that you're a leader as it is. You've sort of picked this journey. No one's picking you. So putting them in the right mindset, letting them understand that, okay, you're at this task anyway. You're going to be part of this. And then encouraging them from that point, identifying their strengths, like Alexandra was saying, and showing them that they can do it. They can actually achieve their goals. They can actually influence their projects. They can actually lead a team to a conclusion. So once they're able to identify that themselves, then you start giving them all the ammo they need to go out and sort of complete their career goals, the goals that are provided for in their project. So that I think that's one way to go out and identify leaders. I was going to add one more thing, and my mind seems to have.
It's okay.
Concentrated. I concentrated so much on that one. I'm like.
That's okay.
Identifying strengths, and while giving them the structure.
Right. Yes.
Because unstructured sometimes makes it even more challenging. So if it's an open-ended, too many choices, they don't know which one to choose. Again, lesson from being a mom.
Right.
I'm like, but you have all these choices. It should be easier, but it's actually much harder.
And they found that in marketing on store shelves. If you have too many choices, it's hard to make a decision. Then if you have just a few choices, then it becomes much easier, which is interesting dynamic there.
I mean, that's an important aspect. I think that's kind of where I was going with it. A lot of people think that, limitations, aka weaknesses, prevent people from becoming leaders. I think you play up their strengths, yes, but once you've identified the bounds within which you're operating, those weaknesses or those limitations, this is where creativity occurs. A lot of people have this misunderstanding that you need a sandbox environment to be creative. Actually, to be creative, you need parameters. And once you've identified what your parameters are in terms of how far you can push your envelopes, now you become creative. And creativity is a leadership activity.
Right. Yeah. Well, creativity, I've heard courage, kindness, forgiveness, find all the rules and then break them. That's the title of a book I think that Gallup wrote about first break all the rules. Yeah, about all the rules and myths of leadership and management and how they really. It's actually a really, really good book that dives into a lot of data. It's Gallup, of course, is going to have a lot of data. So, kind of before we close, just any real quick tools or wisdom you'd like to share with the leaders, kind of before we go into the lightning round. Not that I want to scare you about the lightning round, but yeah.
I think the key thing, especially in planning, since we're planners, well, I'm a planner at least, is be receptive. Listen to people. I think that's a common thing that you hear a lot about. Listening to people, be receptive. Communication is important. Part of that communication isn't simply what you say back, but it's what your body language is and your posture, especially in the planning environment. And then also, I always tell people, don't hold a grudge. Whatever the circumstance might be, never hold a grudge. It's toxic. It will ruin a lot of aspects, whether your project, whether you're talking about your project, whether you're talking about your business, whether you're talking about just personal relationships. Holding a grudge is very toxic, and I say don't do it no matter what. People have things to offer you, and there's a lot of value in every individual, and it's a fine thing to waste if you're going to hold a grudge against someone. Right.
Excellent.
And I think that grudge part is, I'll piggyback on it in terms of just being honest. Mm-hmm. I think that's the best way to go, because if you're not honest, they're not a mind reader.
Right.
And so then that resentment or, toxic feeling will grow. So if you're honest in a constructive way, right, then you create the trust needed to build, on your career, your personal life and things like that. Right. So honesty,
trust, all underlined with courage, right? Because nobody's going to step out there without the courage, which is not, the absence of fear, but it's the willingness to go on in spite of the fear, right? So, well, thanks for being here. I got some special. Part of this is about letting the audience kind of get a better feel for who you are and everything.
I feel like I need a buzzard.
No, we're good. So these are quick. So, and I've kind of settled on a few that are kind of standard, but we'll jump around a little bit. So, The Office or Parks and Rec?
The Office.
The Office?
Michael Scott.
Scott.
Hands down.
Yeah. Dawn or dusk?
Dawn. Yeah. I like that quiet beginning.
Right.
It's literally an awakening of sorts.
Right.
Every single day.
It is. All right. A place you want to travel, most want to travel next or soon.
Wow.
Kind of like that bucket list place.
Yeah. I think there's two on my bucket list that I want. Austria.
Okay.
I've always wanted to go to Austria, and I've always wanted to go to Japan.
Okay.
Yeah. I've heard it's very beautiful in Japan. I've seen pictures, but it's otherworldly over there. So it's a nice place to put on my bucket list.
You've picked two places where I've been in the airport, but not outside the airport.
Yeah.
So Okinawa, that's really, the Japanese don't necessarily consider Okinawa part of Japan, even though it's part of the nation. So
I'd say, well, since I was little, Egypt.
Okay.
And then most recently, Portugal.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. All right. What's your favorite season?
Fall.
Fall.
Yeah, I would say fall with the caveat that it has to be Chicago.
You have to see the leaves, the
Yes.
crisp evening air.
The fall in Chicago is absolutely beautiful.
Right.
Winter is not, and spring is not, but fall is.
I have to say, I mean, I love fall, but my first spring in Pittsburgh, I moved from Pittsburgh, to Pittsburgh from Miami, and it was breathtaking.
Right.
Because you never experience all the seasons in Miami.
Right.
And so just to see everything come back was really amazing. It was so exciting.
Right. Okay. I'll do a couple more. Favorite movie?
Ooh, favorite movie. So have you ever seen Sharp's Rifles?
I don't think I have.
And the Sharp series, a BBC series.
Oh, okay.
But Sharp's Rifles is my favorite,
All right.
hands down.
Okay.
Oh gosh. I hate these favorite. I'm terrible with best favorite. Oh, it's going to sound really cheap. I don't even know. Oh, I'm going to
That's
say
okay.
When Harry Met Sally.
Okay. Hey. All right.
It's my go-to.
Your go-to. All right. Well, I think with that, we'll wrap it up. Hey, I really appreciate y'all being here today. It's great to have you both, and not necessarily with a piece of paper in front of us talking about a project, really more to talk about leadership. And I really like the way kind of some of your career and design elements interact with leadership philosophies and how people can lead with those things and think through those things. I really appreciate that. And hopefully, as we wrap up, everybody's gotten enough of our product placement here on the table. If not, I'll take one more drink to Florida Sports Coast, and that's water, by the way. Well, thank you for being here. It was great to have you
Thank you,
both.
Dan.
And thanks to our media relations team who made this effort possible. They do a great job in and out all the time, every day. And thank you for joining us for this episode of Pasco Podcast. I'm Dan Biles, and until the next one.
For more information on Pasco County government, please visit mypasco.net and check us out on Facebook and Twitter.